In Nigeria, the call for the suspension of the new tax laws scheduled to take effect in January 2026 is being led by a coalition known as the National Opposition Movement, NOM, with significant backing from the People's Democratic Party, PDP. Key demands and arguments. The opposition's demand for a suspension, or halt, to the rollout is based on several socioeconomic concerns. Assault on livelihoods. NOM spokesperson Chil Igbauyua has described the reform as an attack on ordinary Nigerians rather than a genuine fiscal improvement. They argue that the policy is anti-people, given the current high inflation and poverty rates.
At no time in the history of the country has life been so short, so brutish, and so miserable for citizens. Global Economic Index rates Nigeria as the country with the lowest quality of life, lower than even our poor neighbors like China Republic, Togo. The tragedy is that the federal government is compounding this multidimensional failure by focusing on its political interests and not the security and welfare of the Nigerian people. As Nigeria drifts into multidimensional failure, many patriotic citizens are worried that the imminent collapse of Nigeria. Democracy, through the comprehensive incompetence and corruption of the Tinubu administration, would gravely compromise the security and human development crisis in West Africa. These patriotic citizens are now coming together under the umbrella of the Nigerian opposition movement to keep vigil on the development around security and prosperity of the Nigerian people under the mismanagement of the Tinubu administration, and to raise our voices as sentinels of national liberation and transformation. We are worried the several failures of the Tinubu administration have not elicited the right kind of response from Nigerians' political class. But we are elated to note that on the 14th of December, we woke up to the gratifying news of a statement from a select group of leaders who chose to identify with the people by speaking out against tyranny. We deeply commend their courage and commitment to the cause of the voiceless downtrodden. Posterity will forever acknowledge their act of selflessness and patriotism. We also note with approval the efforts by the organized labor through the Nigerian Labour Congress and the Trade Union Congress to challenge the massive impoverishment of Nigerians through Tinubu's self-serving economic policies, and we associate with the NLC and the TUC in their heroic efforts in the tradition of organized labor in Nigeria to fight for dignity and freedom of the working people. The situation in Nigeria today is so terrible. Many Nigerians can barely afford food, transport, security, or pay their electricity bills and rents. It is sad that it is at a time as this that the Tinubu administration is rolling out the most punitive and exploitative tax regime in the history of Nigeria. Even the colonial authorities, in its viciousness, did not contemplate taxing poor Nigerians the way Tinubu plans at the beginning of the new year 2026. The viciousness of this administration shows that Nigeria would be hit by the exploitative and inhuman tax regimes in January when they do not have the fiscal space for such sacrifices. This exploitative tax regime points to the thoughtlessness of the Tinubu administration and its unyielding commitment to cater to the financial interests of the oligarchs to the detriment of the ordinary Nigerians who he continues to punish with all manner of taxes and rising prices. Let us be clear. what President Tinubu is rolling out in January is not a tax reform. It is an assault on the livelihoods of ordinary Nigerians who he has not hidden his content and whose prosperity is not part of the agenda of his government. According to the new tax law, all adults of taxable age, whether employed or not, must file a tax return between January 1st and 31st March 2026, after which sanctions for non-filing will begin to apply. For owners of companies, you must file for all your employees, even if they are paid below the taxable bracket. Remember, you cannot make the filing if you do not have the tax identification number. This is so mindless in a country where over 70 million are unemployed, where people do not have good access to internet services, and where the level of service delivery from state institutions are poor or almost non-existent. President Tinubu has set up an exploitative racket against innocent Nigerians. This reads like a tragedy from the infamous Lagos governance. Small and medium businesses are struggling to survive under a bad policy environment. Yet, the government continues to pile pressure on them and does not provide any serious business support. By the new tax plan, Nigerians earning less than minimum wage will be heavily taxed. The government has removed all subsidies and exposed low-wage earners and the unemployed to the high tariffs. Still, the government intends to overtax them, creating demanding human development and truncating any prospects of serious and sustained economic growth. This government continues to ask Nigerians to give more and more, while it allows those in public office to take more and more. Tinubu has brought Nigerians to their knees, but he will not relent until he brings Nigerians to the grave. We shall not allow suffering Nigerians to be brought to their grave. We as Nigerian opposition movement have decided to stand up in support of those opposition politicians who issued the letter a few days ago, and the NLC and TUC to say enough is enough. This tax plan must not take off now. Its implementation must be suspended immediately. This is not a tax reform. This tax is a weapon fashioned against the economic well-being and social security of suffering and poor Nigerian citizens. This government is asking Nigerians who have already been brought down on their knees by the weight of poverty and squalor and have nothing left to give more. No, you cannot tax hunger. You cannot tax poverty. And you cannot tax people into prosperity. Since he came into office, President Tinubu has shown where his heart is. It is not with the Nigerian people. It is with a few oligarchs who are attached to his economic and political interests. The bad policies of the administration are intentionally so because President Tinubu is not committed to the prosperity of ordinary citizens. He is committed to getting and keeping political power at a toll of creating wealth for himself and his family and friends. This is bad for Nigeria. As leaders of conscience, we cannot justify Tinubu's exploitative taxes against the poor in Nigeria because there is no evidence of prudence or due process in this administration. For the past 2 years and more, we have witnessed the most expansive state capture in Nigeria's history. The nation's revenue agencies like the NNPC and FIRS are reeking with grand corruption. The Tinubu administration does not recognize transparency and accountability. It continues to conduct its business in secrecy as if the Nigerian Federation has become his family agency, incorporated. For instance, why would the FRS enter into an MOU with the French agency regarding management of Nigeria's tax regime and refuse to publicly disclose the content of the MOU, especially in the circumstances where Tinubu has made France his second home and business center? Does public interest not dictate that FIRS publish the MOU since Nigerians are worried at the prospects of the business deal with France compromising Nigeria's strange national interests? Since President Tinubu came into power, it has been one allegation and report, one high-level grand corruption or another, starting with the mind-boggling corruption of the former Minister of Humanitarian Services, where corruption cases have been swept under the carpet. For the first time in the history, a leading Nigerian private sector businessman is openly accusing Tinubu's top regulator of brazen corruption. This has never been seen or heard in Nigeria. President Tinubu's idea of public leadership has no place for social contract, no place for due process or protection of national norms and institutional standards. Recently, Professor Wole Soyinka, a staunch supporter of President Tinubu administration, was forced to voice out great distress at the privatization of the Nigerian state by the Tinubu administration. He said Sheikh Tinubu, the president's son who has no public office, has sufficient military and police escorts to overrun Benin Republic. That is typical Bola Tinubu as Nigeria's president. He just keeps it in the family. It is about me and my family, and to hell with Nigerians. Therefore, in the context of President Tinubu's administration war against Nigerians, we do not believe the new taxes would serve any public good. From the experience of the past, Tinubu's hard taxes will not translate into better hospitals, security, or jobs. Nigerians are being asked to pay more without being promised anything in return. This tax drive is not different from the reckless removal of fuel subsidy, where the resultant gains, which are unaccounted for, rather than being injected into productive economy for the benefit of the citizens, is being deployed to funding the flamboyance of a bloated government, cronies, and families. The opaque outsourcing through an MOU with the French concern is a disturbing indicator that no accountability is intended. President Tinubu is not focused on governance, he is focused on brazen exploitation. We reject this task because the timing is cruel and the logic is irrational. Fuel subsidy removal, naira collapse, food inflation, and rising electricity tariffs have already pushed households and small business to the edge. Introducing an aggressive tax regime now not only shows but indeed confirms the widely held belief of a government dangerously out of touch with reality. As an oligarch and authoritarian, President Tinubu, by this tax plan, concentrates enormous powers in the hands of revenue authorities in a country with weak safeguards. Account access, which is already being enforced, penalties, and automated enforcement without strong oversight invite abuse. When citizens fear the taxman more than they trust the government, something is fundamentally wrong. Now, our demands. The national opposition movement demands 1. The immediate suspension of the tax plan's takeoff date. 2. National consultation involving labor, civil society, SMEs, professionals, and state governments. 3. Explicit social protection guarantees tied to any tax reform. 4. A focus on taxing luxury, excess profits, monopolies, and corruption, not poverty. 5. Strong legal safeguards to protect taxpayers' rights. Nigeria does not suffer from low taxation. Nigeria suffers from waste, corruption, mismanagement, and policy arrogance. You do not fix government failure by billing the victims. We stand with Nigerian workers, traders, professionals, and small businesses. We will resist any policy that punishes the poor to excuse leadership failures. If this tax plan is forced through without suspension and consultation, the government will be fully responsible for the social and economic consequences. This is not a threat. It is a warning grounded in reality. Nigeria is hurting, and the suffering Nigerians have limits. Let us warn President Tinubu and his enforcers. The crisis in West Africa is a crisis of accountable governance, of authoritarian rule without accountability, and state capture guided by greed and arrogance. Nigeria should be saved the misfortune of stoking the fire of conflict that will destroy the prospects of democracy and development in Nigeria. Enough of insecurity, enough of the burden of his tax masters, enough of assault against opposition leaders. As we close the year, we declare a commitment to close President Tinubu's gross incompetence and assault on the integrity and stability of the Nigerian state. Thank you all. See the way it is, and it is, clearly amendable. It can be amended. So it's not a dead horse. It's a living, legislation, and is therefore subject to amendments. So the amendments can cure the defect that is being complained of. Now, the question, was there any legal input from this particular body? Incidentally, at the time that was done, this body was not in existence yet. But at different other fora where some of the members of this body belonged, they had made their inputs. And we know what, I'm also a product of the National Assembly, and we know what a public hearing is supposed to produce. You've just been told that even what managed to be passed by the National Assembly is different from what was accented to as law and then gazetted. So the suspicion of fraud just runs across the entire process. So I do not think that the opinions of Nigerians were taken. And like my colleague CID Maduapom also reiterated, we are all aware that the National Economic Council rejected this document. Whatever was done behind to get some who say no to say yes, we don't know. But because maybe some of them are not part of those who are now suffering the consequences of this legislation, they could say, well, you can go ahead if it's going to help us to win 2027 election. That's not what the poor people are saying. They are saying, let us breathe, because right now we cannot breathe. Thank you. My name is Honorable Chile Ibawa, former member of the National Assembly, former Chief Executive Public Complaints Commission of Nigeria. Thank you. I'm a member of the ADC.
Nation that is blessed, human and material resources. Now one of the most indebted nations on earth. No thanks to President Bola Ahmed. Within 2 to 3 years, he has borrowed more than all the governments together from 1960. And what is he borrowing for? To siphon the money away. We had about 17.2 trillion naira to watch pipeline. And these same people we are complaining, they are paying 7 trillion naira a year for subsidy for Nigeria. Is strong. They promise that if they remove the subsidy, they would have money enough to provide infrastructure for us. Today, ASU is going on strike because nothing is provided for that.
every resistance that is constitutional. And it must be noted that in spite of the fact that Nigerians have come out repeatedly to talk about how difficult this is going to be and how they do not agree with this particular law, it has been passed, and that hell-bent attitude to take it on without looking at the suffering of the people. Resistance is allowed within the law, and that is what must be done. Thank you.
With the first attack on the psyche of Nigerians on the 29th of May 2023, with the announcement of the inhumane policy of subsidy is gone. Nigerians tolerated it, thinking maybe there was indeed something genuine that will come out of it.